It's deeply troubling to know that online data brokers are constantly buying and selling people's private information. Meanwhile, blue lilies swayed gently along the edges of the teepees, where children played and elders conversed. This serene prairie scene, once a hub of traditional gatherings, was fading into memory. The Mipu, or Nez Perce people, were embarking on their final journey into exile. Though an 1855 treaty had guaranteed them rights to most of their ancestral lands, the discovery of gold in 1860 by Euro-Americans set a chain of events in motion. Waves of prospectors and miners arrived, fragmenting and transforming the land piece by piece. The boom towns, with their constant activity and cough of industry, foretold the unrelenting influx of settlers. These newcomers violated the 1855 treaty, staking claims for homes, farms, and ranches on Nez Perce land. Despite their long-standing alliance with the United States, the Nez Perce resisted retaliation, instead seeking diplomatic solutions. To protect the gold mines and settlements, government representatives redrew the borders in 1863, convincing a few conciliatory Nez Perce leaders to sign a treaty relinquishing nearly 90% of their territory. Chief Joseph of the Wallowa Valley likened this betrayal to discovering a neighbor had sold your horses without permission. The Nez Perce were a collection of semi-autonomous bands, none of which could legally speak for the others. Even U.S. government commissioners admitted in 1873 that the Treaty of 1863 could not lawfully bind Joseph and his band. Yet this acknowledgement did not translate into respect for Nez Perce sovereignty. While most Nez Perce moved to the reservation, bands led by Joseph, Hulhulzit, Looking Glass, and White Bird stayed peacefully on their ancestral homelands. By 1877, however, military threats from General Oliver Otis Howard forced them toward the reservation. Not everyone could accept surrender. Under the cover of night, some young Nez Perce men, haunted by memories of past injustices, acted on their rage. Settlers had stolen cattle, assaulted women, and killed men, acts largely ignored by American authorities. Seeking retribution for a relative's death, 3 men attacked settlers, killing several. The following night, they rallied 16 more warriors, escalating their vengeance. The raiders struck brutally, killing approximately 15 settlers, including men, women, and children. While away from camp during the raids, Chief Joseph condemned the actions of the young warriors, lamenting, "Our young men were quick-tempered, and I have had great trouble in keeping them from doing rash things. I know that my young men did a great wrong." Yet, the deeds of a few became a casus belli for the United States against the entire Nez Perce. General Howard dispatched over 100 soldiers to pursue the Nez Perce, targeting a canyon where they had moved their camp. When some Nez Perce approached under a white flag, a U.S. volunteer fired on them, shattering any hope of negotiation. The soldiers dismounted and advanced, only to face fierce resistance. War cries echoed through the grassy hills as approximately 60 Nez Perce sharpshooters emerged, executing precise attacks on trumpeters and officers to dismantle American command and cohesion. The result was devastating. Over 30 American soldiers lay dead, while not a single Nez Perce life was lost. The Nez Perce were formidable fighters, employing well-bred Appaloosa horses for mobility, using signals for coordination, and emboldening one another with songs and taunts. With limited ammunition, their gunners had developed remarkable accuracy. Fearing further uprisings, General Howard escalated his efforts, ordering the arrest of the neutral chief Looking Glass and his followers. As U.S. cavalry attacked their villages, families fled while soldiers looted homes and seized 600 horses. This aggression shattered Looking Glass's neutrality. By early July, he and his band joined Joseph and the other Nez Perce, who had already skirmished with U.S. troops and raided abandoned settlements following their triumph in the canyon. The combined group, now bolstered by some Palouse allies, grew to approximately 800 people, including 250 fighting men. In a show of resilience, the caravan repelled another attack by Howard before vanishing into the treacherous Bitterroot Range of the Rocky Mountains. Arranging safe passage with local troops, the Nez Perce caravan, a miles-long column of people, food, teepees, and weapons carried by 2,000 horses, pressed through the rugged mountains into the Bitterroot Valley. For generations, the Nez Perce had traversed these mountains for bison hunts and built alliances with the indigenous peoples of the Great Plains. Looking Glass reassured his fellow chiefs that they could find aid among the Crow, with whom the Nez Perce had once fought alongside against the Sioux. This route, rich with history, was the same traveled by Lewis and Clark 7 decades earlier. During their expedition, the starving Americans were fed by the Nez Perce, and on their return journey, spent over a month with them, solidifying a bond of friendship. Early French-Canadian traders referred to various local peoples as Pierce Nose or Perce, a term later anglicized and specifically applied to the Nez Perce, though by then most had abandoned the practice of nose piercing. The Nez Perce continued to live in harmony with their rivers, mountains, and prairies, residing in teepees or larger lodges made from reed mats or bison hides. Salmon formed the cornerstone of their diet, supplemented by game and wild plants. Their clothing went beyond plain buckskin. Nez Perce women wore intricate basket hats, vibrant dresses, and jewelry, while men adorned themselves with similar decorations and sacred war shirts. The Nez Perce were guided by spiritual beliefs centered on Wayakin, personal guardians thought to provide protection and guidance. As some embraced Christianity, others followed the Dreamer faith, whose prophets urged a return to indigenous traditions, interpreting the cataclysmic changes in their world as signs of an approaching apocalypse. The forests and plains had been emptied of their creatures, villages devastated by disease, and their people exiled from their ancestral lands. Chief Joseph and his people pressed onward, joined by Hopiath and their scouts, who informed them that General Howard was weeks behind their trail. Despite their hardships, the Nez Perce remained determined, navigating through landscapes rich with history but shadowed by uncertainty. They were unaware that the frontier forts of the United States had been summoned against them. The band set their teepees at the foot of a tall slope along the Big Hole River. That night, over 100 American forces crept close enough, they later told, to hear dogs barking and Nez Perce babies crying. Just before dawn on August 9th, the soldiers advanced, instructed to aim low into the teepees to kill people as they slept. They raked fire at the fleeing Nez Perce. The boy hiding in the nearby stream with his mother recalled. One little girl held her arm up from the cold water. It was a big bullet hole. I could see through it. The Nez Perce warriors struck back, killed many attackers, and repulsed them to the woods. A lengthy, sniping battle covered the retreat of the Nez Perce caravan. The Americans had managed to kill 60 to 90 Nez Perce, including many women and children. 6 attackers would receive medals of honor. The shaken Nez Perce questioned the military leadership of Looking Glass, but it was he who, 10 days later, led an attack directly on Howard's camp, stealing over 100 mules and horses. Having failed again to capture his targets, Howard grew weary, and he was chided by Commanding General of the Army William T. Sherman for his lack of resolve. The Nez Perce trekked ahead into stranger parts known to some in those days as the land of the burning ground, the recently established Yellowstone National Park. The trees, birds, and all the creatures grew and lived in the lush ruins of an earthen tower 40 miles across, the caldera of a supervolcano not truly awoken in 600,000 years. One could still recall when herds of bison rumbled past the sparkling salvos of its geysers, and grizzlies and moose lumbered across the wooded hills, and wolf dents stirred at the approach of outsiders. The forest now stood quieter. Animals along the frontier had been variously trapped, shot, and poisoned. General Sherman wrote with satisfaction that the sudden depopulation of animals had starved Native Americans from their homelands on the nearby plains and cleared the land for settlement and industry. This vast region has undergone in the past 10 years a more violent and radical change than any like space of the Earth's surface during any previous 50 years. The game is nearly all gone. The Indian has been forced onto small reservations. I can bear personal testimony that where in 1868 millions of buffalo could be found, not a single one is now seen. While the wildlife of Yellowstone would one day flourish again, for now the park was a place to hide. Over the next 2 weeks, The main caravan took tourist parties captive to cover their whereabouts before releasing them with food and directions. But small bands of Nez Perce warriors, furious over the massacre at Big Hole, broke off, robbed, and attacked several tourists to the condemnation of Chief Joseph. Looking Glass, meanwhile, made contact with the Crow, who declined his request for help. They would not risk defying the United States. A last hope lay far north. Hounded by American forces after his triumph at Little Bighorn a year ago, Lakota chief Sitting Bull and some of his followers had fled to Canada. Parts patrolled only by mounted police who lacked the power to extradite armed indigenous warriors. Whitebird had long advocated that the Nez Perce seek refuge with Sitting Bull, and the Council of Chiefs now agreed. The prospect of such an alliance had occurred to Howard, but General Philip Sheridan assured him that the idea was ridiculous. While Howard trailed the Nez Perce, additional forces under Colonel Sturgis angled to cut them off. Threading the jagged Clark's Fork Canyon, the Nez Perce then ascended the great rock walls, milled their horses in a circle to conceal their trail, and feinted south. Sturgis pursued the false trail, only to find that the Nez Perce had cut back north into the canyon and escaped onto the plains. Sturgis reached them on September 13th, and with the help of the Crow managed to capture many horses, but the Nez Perce killed several of his men and escaped into the night. The long days of riding ahead were punctuated by fearful nights on the quiet expanse. Around Cow Island, the hungry Nez Perce skirmished with soldiers and plundered supplies from a steamboat landing and a wagon train. The winds grew cold as they trekked north. The horses were hurting, the people still grieving. Looking Glass urged the weary Nez Perce to set up their tattered tents in the foothills of the Bear Paw Mountains. After over 1,000 miles and 4 grueling months of travel, they were now just 40 miles from the Canadian border and potential refuge. However, their journey would not end in safety. Colonel Nelson A. Miles, a seasoned military leader who had defeated Lakota bands over the past year, had tracked the Nez Perce with a sizable force reinforced by Cheyenne scouts. On September 30th, Miles' troops launched a surprise attack on the camp, firing upon its defenders and capturing most of the horses. While some Nez Perce managed to flee north, the majority found themselves pinned down as warriors exchanged deadly fire with the advancing soldiers. By the end of the day, the enemy had entrenched themselves in positions surrounding the camp. Among the fallen were Thulhazat and Alyakot, Chief Joseph's brother. That night, snow began to fall, blanketing the corpses of loved ones and veiling the horrors of the battlefield. The survivors dug into the frozen ground for shelter, while the remaining warriors maintained a desperate watch from rifle pits. Above them, artillery thundered, pounding the hills and sealing the fate of the Nez Perce. Many hoped that those who fled north would return with Sitting Bull and the Lakota and scatter the Americans. Looking Glass rose to scan the faint edges of the battlefield for rescuers, and an American soldier shot him in the head. The cold stalemate lasted for days. Howard arrived in Miles' camp late on October 4th. While each side had killed around 25 of the other, the Nez Perce people were ailing. The next day, flanked by 5 companions, Chief Joseph rode over the White Hills, his rifle across his lap. He met with Miles and Howard, and it was recorded that he surrendered with the words, "I'm tired of fighting. Our chiefs are killed. Looking Glass is dead. Thursday Huzat is dead. The old men are all dead. He who leads the young men is dead. The little children are freezing to death. My people, some of them, have run away to the hills and have no blankets, no food. No one knows where they are. I want time to look for my children and see how many of them I can find. Maybe I shall find them among the dead. Hear me, my chiefs. I am tired. My heart is sick and sad. From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever." Whitebird would escape north with some followers, and all around 200 reached Sitting Bull's camp. Joseph and many others could have escaped if they had been willing to abandon the young, wounded, and elderly, but they were not. The 400 or so who surrendered at the Battle of Beer Paw did so, with the understanding that they would move to the Nez Perce Reservation, the remaining sliver of their homeland. But Sherman overruled Miles and sent the prisoners to Indian Territory, a bleak spot of land among other removed peoples such as the Comanche and Osage. Days after the end of the war, The New York Times published the following: "We freely express the opinion that the Nez Perce War was, on the part of our government, an unpardonable and frightful blunder, a crime whose victims alike are the hundreds of our gallant officers and men, and the peaceful bands who were goaded by injustice and wrong to the warpath." The belief that the Nez Perce had been cheated of their homeland and unjustly hunted by the U.S. was not the tendentious making of later revisionists, but in fact a prevailing view among the American public during and after the war. Sherman conceded that the Nez Perce had fought humanely and displayed a courage and skill that elicited universal praise. Chief Joseph became a national figure. He delivered speeches in the Capitol and tearfully pleaded for a return to his homeland. The Nez Perce had lost up to 150 people during the war. Within 3 years of exile, the Nez Perce suffered devastating losses due to limited rations and a lack of medicine, resulting in 150 more deaths. Among these were nearly all the young children, including Chief Joseph's daughter. General Howard expressed sympathy in a letter to Joseph, writing, "I have much compassion for you. I feel sorry that so many have sickened and died." Even General Miles, who believed in the forced civilization of indigenous people, admitted, "We have carried on a cruel, relentless war of extermination against the Indian." Those who had fled to Canada eventually returned to the United States, and by 1885, the Nez Perce were permitted to return to the Northwest. However, their community was fragmented, and they were confined to reservations. Chief Joseph, barred even from the Nez Perce reservation, was exiled to the Colville Reservation. Despite his enduring hope of reclaiming his ancestral land, it remained a dream. He passed away on the Colville Reservation in 1904. Reflecting on the broader conflict, General Sheridan, a year after the Nez Perce surrendered, offered a stark assessment. "We took away their country and their means of support, broke up their mode of living, their habits of life, introduced disease and decay among them. And it was for this and against this they made war. Would anyone expect less?" In stark contrast to the somber legacy of displacement and loss, today's modern concerns center on digital privacy. It's unsettling to realize the internet is teeming with data brokers. Companies harvesting personal details like social security numbers, birthdays, and addresses to build invasive profiles. Their privacy experts work year-round to remove your data from search results posted by hundreds of data brokers, ensuring peace of mind.